that January is so difficult? What is it that makes January a difficult ask? What is it about that back to school feeling that no matter how old you are, no matter how long it is since you left school or college or your apprenticeship or university or whatever it was you did, how is it still possible that those first few days and sometimes weeks for us back at work just feels like a throwback to that whole school thing? What is it that means, and what is it that we can do with it if we better understand it? Because here's the interesting thing. If we understand the difficulty that people have here about getting back to work, if we understand this, we can in fact do a considerably better job of our first few days and weeks, I'm sure not months, when you get back to work after the Christmas break. Because you know what it's like. There's often that point, isn't there? The pre Christmas moment, it seems to slow up and slow up and slow up, and suddenly it's sort of mad rush, and then you're in Christmas, and then Christmas happens, and as people always say, gosh, feel like I've turned into my older relatives. Oh, before you know where it is, it's all over. And there's that weird time zone between Christmas and New Year. And depending on whether you work, whether you get anything done at home, whether you have to go into the workplace, you have this almost disconnect, I would describe it as, between you and work and the real world and timelines, and everything doesn't feel quite right. And then New Year rolls round, a lot of people might take an extra day or 2 days, and suddenly we're here. And if you're watching this live, you will know we are here, 5th of January. And I've dialed this in quite late in the day, coming up to 4:30 on this first day. So there's that weird sense, isn't there, of first day back. Did you get anything done? I caught up on my emails. I caught up with a few people. I caught up here and there. But this is prime time. And if you know anything about presentations, if you know about the way that the human brain works, we as a species have a bit of a predilection for the beginning and the end. These are, if you like, prime real estate in our brain. So I do a lot of work with people for presenting, conference speaking, and I'm always sharing with people at the start of the presentation, at the end of the presentation, these are your best bits. This is when you can absolutely grab people's attention simply because they are most engaged at the start, because at the ends they can feel the end, right? And if you think about what often happens coming up to the end of a timeline, so as you come up towards the end of your you come up to your year end in your organization, you know, budgets have to be met, new budgets have to be applied for, things have to be signed off, and there's a scramble to get stuff done, right? We know that as you get up to, for example, start of the summer break, there's a scramble to get things finished and signed off. And as humans, we need that uh, sense of completion. You can tick that off. You can tick that off. You can tick that off, and you know that you can go on your vacation with things now done. But let's go to the ultimate restart, which is, of course, start of January, where we are right now, 5th of January. So for many people, today is or has been your first day back at work. And many leaders don't use this first day and this first 3 or 4 days and this first week, sometimes even stretching into the second week and beyond, as well as they might. And the problem is, many of us come back with this, either it's a sense of, oh God, I'm back at work. I'm sorry if that's your case. Or you come back with a, right, this is the year I'm going to X, Y, and Z. And that's what we ought to be keying into, because too many of our teams don't really know what they are expected, or what we expect from them. They don't really know what our priority is. In fact, let's start with that word. And I'm going to start giving you some thoughts about this. I'm going to talk a little bit about this mindset that we could be keying into. And I hate to tell you this, whatever your politics are, I know that statistically, Keir Starmer isn't your greatest example of a leader. As I say, you may think he is, so I don't wish to argue with you. But statistically, just looking at UK records, he's probably not right up there as people you recognise as a great leader. But he has already done something that, as leaders in our organisations, in our businesses, as our teams, as our departments, and by the way, this will apply whether you are in charge of a big business, whether you are running a normal sized business, a team, even if you're a supervisor, no disrespect if you are, by the way, I'm just trying to give a scale, but if you're a supervisor with 2 or 3 people reporting to you, we could use this first 2 to 3 days much more effectively than we are currently. We can take a leaf out of Starmer's book and we can do it a bit better. So here's what I have in mind. The first week back, the first few days back, this is prime time when people want to engage. And if we use this time right, we can get something from it. And whether or not people come back a bit jaded because they had a great break, whether or not they don't really like their jobs and here they are again back in their jobs, or whether they're the kind of person that comes back thinking, no, I want to get started, we can key into that. And as leaders, we ought to be doing that. The first proper week back, there's often talk about motivation. There's often talk about energy. There's often talk about momentum, getting things done. And most people don't really have a motivation problem. In fact, as I said, at the start of a thing, of a timeline, of a presentation of a year, people already have a degree of energy. They want to get stuff started and they want to get stuff finished. And so we ought to be tying into that. What they're actually waiting for is the problem. And we tend to bombard them either with waffle. This is our motivation, our energy. This is the year, the blah, 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 blah. We need a priority, and priority should be one thing. Too many of us, and I've done the same, too many of us have priorities with an S, right? But if you look at the word priority, it's the one thing. What's the one thing? So I would challenge you right now, as a leader, think about this, write this. If you want to do it, if you're watching this live, go live and write it in the comments. What's your priority now? Commercially, you may not be able to tell me. And if you can't tell me, how clear are you about what your single priority is? Now, look, if your single priority is this thing here, that will probably flow out into 2 or 3 or 4 feed points. And each of those will then have a thing that needs doing. And each of those, you come back more and more and more until you have a whole range of micro tasks that you will require your teams to do. But my challenge to you today at the start of the year would be, how clear is that priority for you? Because if it's not clear for you, there is no way it is clear with your team. And if it is not clear for your team, you cannot maximize this time, prime time, real time, to get into this. Because what people want to know, what is it that matters to you? They want to know right now what matters to you. They want to know what matters to you through January. They want to know how you see the first quarter going. They want to know roughly where you're going to be at the second quarter, the mid-year point, and they want to know what's the big goal. But as any of us knows, the problem with 2 great, long, massive goals is we can't conceive of them. As humans, we need something a little bit more grabbable right now. So look, if it's the 5th of January, if it's the 7th of January, whenever you're back at work, 12th of January, God, you had a lot of time off, didn't you? But whenever you're back to work, how clear are you with your teams to get them started and focused into where they need to go next? Now, the more that you can do that, the more that you can tie into this natural point in the year when teams actually are more open to more specific direction. We want to know, what decisions have you made? What's been decided over the Christmas break? What are you going to announce for us now? What's the big new thing that you're going to share with us? What decisions? Here's a challenge for you, right? At the start of your year, what decisions have you been avoiding up until now? Because here's what I've seen, and I've been working in this space now for more than 30 years. God, 3 decades, right? And I have seen time and time again in all sorts of organizations, all sorts of people, when decisions are not made, when priority is not clear, when we don't know where we're going next, the natural thing that happens is we'll have some meetings. We'll have some catch-up meetings. We'll have some in the round meetings. We'll kick some ideas about. We end up, it's the business of busyness. We end up doing stuff. So it's activity replacing progress. And too many leaders, and I don't know if this is you, but let me throw this to you and see whether this lands. Too many leaders confuse urgency with direction. And everyone's busy, right? Start the new year, everyone's busy, but nothing actually moves because so many people are rushing around, and I'll do this and thing and that and stuff. What we ought to be doing instead, what's the priority? Single. What's the priority? Not priorities. What's the single priority for your team, your department, your division, your bit of the business, of the organization? Where is it that you want them to go? Because if you've got your big goal, right, and your big goal is for December of this year, December 26, that's 12 months. I hate to break this to you. Nobody really cares about a 12-month line. 6-month line, again, not really. We need to break this down. So you've got one thing that you want to achieve, a big thing by the end of the year, a big transformation. And if we're starting that now, what are the steps that we're doing for this? And so what we've got to be able to start to do is move away from keeping options open too long. There's a great argument, isn't there? Start before you're ready. There's a great argument, isn't there? The Pareto law, the 80-20 law. 20% of your actions gives you 80% of your results. You've come across this. This isn't new ideas. But let's think about this at the start of a year. What's the thing now that you can do now, that you set out for your team now, that gets them focused and doing something in the right direction? Because at the start of the year, your teams come back with a range of different responses. Some are super engaged, some can't wait for the weekends, some hate it still, some are still secretly looking for other jobs. But that's what you've got at the moment. And at the start of the year, there is this natural desire to get started. Think of all the New Year's resolutions that are made and broken in typically the first 3 weeks. In fact, let me challenge you with this. How many resolutions have you set for yourself that you've already broken? Now, if you have decided, let's take an example, a very popular one. If you have decided that you want to become far more visible on social media, you've decided that LinkedIn, let's just take an example, isn't really delivering anymore, and so you need to get out there onto another platform. And you might spend weeks faffing around with the 3 or the 4 or the 5 major channels, and you set up a few profiles, and you do some photos, and you I've got a photo for that one, you write a profile, and you do a thing, and you post it. That's all what I'm talking about. That's that busyness of action. You're not really getting anything done. That is activity replacing progress. What I want you to do is to get started. All right, I'm going to try. I've got my LinkedIn. I'm going to try using Facebook. I'm going to set up a new Facebook profile, and I'm going to get going on this. Too many of us keep options too open for too long. We keep saying we'll see how it goes. There's always going to be a trade-off. If you do this now, you can't do that later. So let's get into some slightly more brave decisions. All right, I'm going to say no early, and that's it for the moment. I'll perhaps come back and look at that in 6 months' time. But for now, this is it. And if we do this with our teams, we start our January, we start our new year in a considerably more powerful way than most people do. You see, January exposes these things. January exposes these problems because the pressure of work hits almost immediately. And because the pressure hits so fast, it hits before clarity can kick in. And what I want you to do, what I want you to do with your teams is to get that clarity now. One thing. I can't possibly boil it down to one thing. I need 3 things. All right, 3 things. If you were to, let's go back to that social media idea. If you were to spend the next 3 weeks choosing the best possible platform, getting started, and faffing around, by the end of January, you'll have a mess of half-remembered platforms. One of them will have 1 post on, one of them will have 5 posts on, one of them will have got you a follower. It'll be a mess. You'll have been dead busy, and you'll have achieved nothing. But this is just with this one example, by the way. If you decided today you were going to do Facebook, I'm not here to advertise Facebook, but you were going to do Facebook, and you sat down for half an hour and you put your profile up, you wrote a bio about what you're looking to achieve as a new network and a new community on Facebook, you want a separate community from LinkedIn. That's not difficult. I'm particularly interested in lorries that carry bins around. There's a random example, right? That's what I love doing. That's my business, and I'm going to start a new community off LinkedIn for that. And you wrote a quick bio, and every day, twice a day, you posted a thing. Hey, here's the new X1Z Alpha. This is great for carrying bins across busy cities. Hey, I've been thinking, why is this? And you would, by the end of that same 3-week period, have some progress. Now, your progress might not be what you want. You might have picked up the wrong audience, or you might have decided Facebook's the wrong channel, but you'd have got somewhere. As opposed to thinking, I'll keep all my options open. The energy we often have at the start of January, the energy your teams have now at the start of January, often feels like stuff's getting done. But if you haven't selected, if you haven't said no to some things, you won't make any progress. So that pressure comes back before the clarity does. Old problems resurface almost immediately. If Bob is having an ongoing argument with Steve, and it was a problem before the Christmas break, it's still a problem today in the new year. You need to deal with that. Our number one program for sales, not sales program, our number one program in terms of sales repeatedly for years is difficult conversations. The number one repeated part when we're running a difficult conversations program, and we have run this program in 35 different countries, both online and face-to-face. We've run tiny snapshot versions and full 2-day on-set, on-program versions, full actor teams with full live case studies. The number one discussion, bar none, is if there's a difficult conversation, I try and not get involved because it's uncomfortable or it's awkward or it's embarrassing, or hopefully it will resolve. It will not. This is the time of year. If you didn't solve it in December, solve it now. This first week that you are in now shows your team how you decide things. And I can share with you, because I have spoken to, the word literally is overused, but I have spoken literally to thousands of learners who have told me they cannot stand it when their manager excuses poor behavior from people on their team because they're worried about it kicking off. I completely get why they are worried about things kicking off. I'm human. I want to be liked, same as you. But at the start of the year, if you need a resolution, this is one of the things that you can do to get more clarity and more direction and more specificity, there's a word to try and say, about where your team's going this year in 2026. Instead, this is what I want you to do. And we're getting towards the end of this program now, folks, by the way. If you've enjoyed this, please do let me know in the usual ways. A little bit of a like always helps. A little comment is always a good thing. If you feel like following me, if you're not already following me, then make sure you check that out. I want you to decide what stops before what starts. Here's what I mean by that. Rather than setting out a new initiative, a new thing, tasking somebody with a new thing, creating a new task force, a new operation, a new team, a new sub-team leader to the team leader, that's all lovely and it's exciting, and dare I say it's a little bit sexy. But there are probably some things you should stop before you start some new initiatives. Look at what was not working at the end of last year. If you're not going to fix it, if it doesn't fundamentally add, get rid of it now. What is it that you are doing that you need to change, alter, cut down? What priorities can you get rid of rather than adding new ones? I would ask you to consider that. If the answer is not comfortable, I get that, but you must do this and you must be clear. I want you to give people permission to focus, and that's much more difficult if they've got all of last year's stuff, all of the unfinished stuff, and then you're busy adding new things for them. New things for them doesn't help them. It just makes it more and more difficult to focus. They don't necessarily want a speech. They do need decisions. Momentum, your team's momentum, your organization, your business's momentum will all follow clarity, not motivation. Motivation's dead exciting in January in the first day or two. It's the same as when you first join a gym. It's the same as when you first make a salad rather than get a takeout. You feel motivated and it feels exciting, but that fades very quickly. You know that. But if your team has clarity, that's much easier to follow. If you've taken away some of the priorities as you originally had them, which you no longer need, which aren't making progress, it makes it easier for them to focus on the one thing. Where do you want to go next? Great, do this, do this, do this. Folks, it has been lovely working with you on this live. I will see you, I'm sure, soon. Oh, I've seen a chat there. Sorry, I've just noticed that. There we go. Do you need to quantify first, says Red Temp. Hello, Red Temp. Do you need to quantify first what works and what needs to change? Red Temp, I think you asked that question just a few moments before I got onto that answer. Yes, absolutely. If there are things that need to go, it is generally speaking, and I apply this to myself as much as anyone else, it is generally speaking worth figuring out, what do I need to stop before what can I add to this? As humans, we get excited by the new, by the shiny. January is a perfect time because as humans, remember our teams are feeling the same, it's a new start. And this is why politicians, I did refer to this earlier, this is why politicians talk about these are our new things this year, this is our new direction, this is what's going to happen. It feels exciting and it just sort of fits. Now, they don't do it very well, in my opinion. Whatever you may have different opinions on your politicians, but our better option here is just to say to our teams, we're going to get rid of these three things. They are diluting the focus. So let's instead focus on this one and this one. You do that, you do that. All the rest of it is noise. Think about what can be reduced before you add in new processes. Folks, thank you very much.